everybody, Patrick Connor here, and welcome to the Knuckles and Gloves podcast. I'm here with my boy Aris Pina, CompuBox operator, and of course, like myself, a fight history file. And we're talking about the worst refereeing performances of all time. And you know why we're talking about that, Aris. Why are we talking about those?
Oh man, because of the fiasco that just happened this past weekend, my friend. That's why we're talking about it.
You know, it's like everybody's got a varied opinion as far as whether or not, Josh Taylor should have won. They got strong opinions too, Jack Catterall, but I think nobody is disputing wherever you sit on who should have won that fight. And we'll get to that in a sec, because I want to know what you think. But wherever it is you sit on who won that fight, I don't think anybody is arguing that it was a shitty officiating performance. It was a poor refereeing performance. And I mean, that's why we're here.
Absolutely. To answer your first question, I thought Catterall definitely won. I'm not going to say it was a robbery on the likes of Joel Casamayor against Jose
Armando Santa Cruz. I remember that shit. That was bad.
That's like that was
bad.
That's what you would call, I would say, like the tier. You know what I mean? Like the one that base all others off, at least in modern times.
Yeah. So I remember that. I remember what like it was like on a pay-per-view or something like that. But
it was on the undercard of a pay-per-view. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so it was a close fight, but I mean, it was one that I thought Catterall clearly won. But yeah, dude, the referee was a complete, I mean, what a mess he made. And not only was it overly officiating, he just didn't have a clue. He was screwing up left and right. He just didn't see, he was a deer caught in headlights. And you can always tell when there's a referee that has no business belonging on a world stage of that type of level. Just, they look completely lost in there. And this was it.
Yeah, man. I agree with you on all counts there. I thought that Jack Catterall deserved that fight, deserved to win the decision. I don't think that it was a massive robbery or anything like that. And I mean, I think that if you just look at the fight round by round, at least for me, it was difficult to not come to a conclusion where Jack Catterall won clearly 6 or 7 rounds. And the rest, apart from maybe 2 or so, where I thought Taylor won pretty clearly, were kind of up for grabs. And it just looked like a close fight that Jack Catterall should have won. And to have it taken away, at least in part, by poor officiating just sucks, dude. It sucks for him. It sucks for fans. And it sucks to also, again, hear shit and read shit like, this is why I'm not a boxing fan. That's why I don't watch anymore. And that's why boxing's not mainstream anymore. And I mean, they ain't wrong. I mean, I'm not gonna argue with them. It's at least partially true. But in any case, it's boxing has a long history of, the third man in the ring just kind of fucking shit up every so often. More often than not, when you're not noticing the referee in there at all. Like, that's what you want. You don't want to notice even that they're in there whatsoever, except with the exception of Steve Willis when he's doing his faces and shit, because he generally does a pretty good job, but him and the expressions is great. Beyond that, you don't want to even see him in there. Unfortunately, today we're talking about fights where the referee was far too much of, the narrative.
Yeah, there's certain refs in history, like you said, that were just masterclass because they didn't make the fight about themselves. They were there.
Some of them still around.
Yeah.
Some of these good refs and bad refs still around.
Yeah, man. It seems like the bad ones just seem to never disappear, though. Huh? They just linger year after year.
For good reason. We'll talk about one today.
Yeah, but I mean, but others, like guys, like the late great Mitch Halpin, for example. I always like to bring him up because, when he unfortunately passed in 2009, it was 2000. When he passed away in 2000, he was a young guy still. I think only in his early 30s, whatever it was. So he definitely still would have been officiating today. But for example, someone like that, and there's tons of others that, I can't even think of off the top of my head that clearly just, they stay out of the way, they do their job, and they're very good at what they do. Even Steve Willis is really good at what he does. He just makes the facial reactions that just make him part of the show more than anything, but he's a damn fine ref.
Yeah, he's a pretty good referee. Yeah, it's just the
it's just the reactions that he does, and you can't help it because they're absolutely hilarious. You know what I mean? The way he walks in there and everything, and then when a guy absolutely gets clocked and you see his eyes bug out and his face contorting, it's hilarious. But
yeah, man, it's good.
He's a really, really damn good ref.
So, I mean, you have the other day between Josh Taylor and Catterall, you had unnecessary points taken away. You had over officiating, kind of stepping into the fight when they didn't need to be stepped into, breaking the action, pulling the guys
It was
aside,
just
giving them
bad. He
warnings.
was completely out of depth, and
Yeah.
there's nothing worse than when you take a point away that's clearly not justified. Realize you fuck up, and then a couple of rounds later try to do a makeup call by taking a point away from the other guy, clearly when he didn't deserve it either. It's just really bad and shows how inept you are at this.
Yeah, that's the kind of refereeing that shouldn't be like that guy shouldn't be getting any more big assignments. That guy needs
And
to
I don't
work
think
his
he
way
will,
back.
man. He needs massive training. I don't even know if that's going to be able to help him out because it seems like he's pretty, set in his ways or what he does, man. That was bad.
Yeah, it was poor. So what's another, like, if somebody's talking about like a bad refereeing job from history or like a notably bad refereeing job, dude, what's your opening salvo here?
I mean, I would even say it would be my first one usually, but it's just because I watched it the other day and it still makes me laugh every time I watch it, right? And not only that, it was so bad that I can't recall another time he ever refereed a big fight or a fight after it. But that was just Jersey Joe Walcott. Easy pick, basic pick, but still just if you're gonna talk about one of the worst, botched jobs in history, you got to go with, Joe Walcott and wandering around having no idea what the hell is going on around him. It just, even though he wasn't that old, he looked like a feeble old man that did not belong anywhere near a ring that night.
Yeah, dude, that was bad overall. Just kind of looking like he didn't know where the hell, he didn't even know which way was up, dude.
Nah, man, it was. It's just the test of time. Like, I mean, if everyone's so set on what's going on with Ali and Liston and the phantom punch and Liston flopping and everything going on, the hysterics of that you almost forget to watch Walcott because that's like a whole scene in itself.
It's like looking around, it's like a search party, huh?
If you don't pay attention to Ali dancing around and yelling at Liston to get up and Liston clearly, flopping around and not trying to get up on his own, and just watch what Walcott's doing, it's one of the funniest things you will ever see. I mean, it's hysterical.
Yeah, it's basically like a referee doing the John Travolta in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. He walks in, he even before that was happening, he just clearly, like, he was the wrong pick. He's having trouble trying to break him up, and it was going to be a long night for him. But then after Liston goes down and you see him, he's trying to make a count. He can't control Ali at all. Ali's running around yelling, being typical Ali that he was. And then right when that happens, Walcott just ignores both of them, just walks away. No ref I've ever seen even just do that. He just completely ignores what's going on because Nat Fleischer, who I guess holded the high command of everybody at that point in time, apparently, right, calls over to Walcott, and then, like you just point out, he's like, oh, what, and then wobbles over there, and at this point, Liston gets up, and they resume fighting with no one officiating it, and then Walcott finally runs back over and stops the fight.
Well, like there was this big hubbub, there's a big fucking complaining section ahead of that fight because already you have Muhammad Ali, who has, he defeats Sonny Liston as Cassius Clay. And then it was either the next day or the day after that, he announces he's going to be a Cassius X. And then like the next day was actually going to be Muhammad Ali. And so there was a massive furor because of that. And then the involvement of, any sort of Muslim involvement, especially to white America at that point, was scary as shit. They didn't know what to do with it. And then, the potential mob involvement on Liston's part. Yes. And then there was like, what was it? 3 or 4 or 5 cities that the fight was supposed to have taken place in before they settled in Lewiston, Maine. And there was a massive, outcry. There's because people were like, where the fuck is Lewiston, Maine? Like, why would we be taking a heavyweight championship fight to Lewiston, Maine? And actually, there was one of the people who led that was Rocky Marciano, believe it or not. Rocky Marciano was talking about, this is going to be the death of boxing. Look at how dead boxing is right now and all this type of shit, which is especially ironic because they talked about Rocky Marciano and his emergence on TV into his day is that was going to be the death of boxing. So irony there. But regardless, the fact that it was going on in Lewiston was already a big problem for a bunch of people. And then they were talking about Maine's, handling of it was going to be poor. And then you bring in Jersey Joe Walcott, who's an inexperienced referee. And it's, the entire thing was just awful, dude. And it was, if you see photos from the venue too, there aren't that many people in attendance. It's pretty small compared to what you would think would be happening for a heavyweight title fight.
I mean, it's Maine. Maine has always been kind of it is one of the oddest locations ever for a heavyweight title fight.
It's just weird.
Considering everything you just mentioned and what went down beforehand, that's clearly what happened too. And the fight was originally going to be in Boston, one of the locations, so it's kind of close proximity. And another thing to mention too, but not to veer too much off into this, but there's remember the postponement originally. I guess Liston, by all accounts, was in the best shape of his career at that point and was really motivated for a rematch. And then Ali, gets the emergency hernia surgery. Was it hernia? No, appendix, or was it?
Yeah, it was one of those two.
One of those.
Yeah, one of those non-lethal, but still but just pressing
you
issues.
Yeah. And then that postponed the fight for a number of months. So it was just a whole fiasco ahead of the fight too. Yeah. But Walcott just. Yeah. And what makes it even more interesting.
And the main thing was, sorry to interrupt you, but the main thing was to kind of address why Nat Fleischer would have been seen as any sort of authority because it's who the fuck in Maine is going to be the boxing authority in Maine at that point, and the answer is nobody. So you got Nat Fleischer ringside, and it's well, you better listen to Nat Fleischer. Sorry, go ahead.
And you're right though, because Fleischer, even though he was the founder and editor of Ring Magazine, he did play a big part in terms of importance in politics and boxing around that point. I mean, he wasn't involved in the mob and was one of those people who pretended that it didn't even exist stupidly, to the point where he even said that he would put up I think they put up a reward if you can show that there was mob ties in boxing, that they would pay you a fee. Yeah, because you want to get cement shoes for getting paid $50, right? Idiots. So anyways, but like I was going to mention, Fleischer did much more than just be a magazine editor or the founder. He was judging fights overseas and doing things of that nature. He was he stepped his toes into a lot of part of boxing. So yeah, him being ringside and calling over Walcott saying, hey, no, he's been down or whatever, he was trying to explain to him that he had the count wrong and all that, Walcott would listen to him. So that wouldn't make sense, but he shouldn't have. I mean, his main priority was trying to. It
sounds absurd that would hold any weight, but it did. He was a person of stature,
Exactly. Much more than I would say any other person that took over the magazine after that. No one kind of held the high regard, really put themselves out there like Fleischer. I mean, Burt Sugar did, but he wasn't out there judging fights and doing all kinds of stuff that Fleischer was doing at that point. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
that's how you have to look at it. But yeah, it was just. It's crazy. And then Walcott went on to become the New Jersey State Athletic Commissioner, which is kind of interesting in itself too later on.
Yeah, he had a lot of involvement in New Jersey boxing for a long time after that. So he was definitely part of a lot of stuff developing. Thankfully, not refereeing fights though, for crying out loud. The fucking guy.
And that's the thing though too. Back then is that not something that really happens today or actually ever happens today, but it was more or less a slightly common occurrence back in the 50s and 60s and stuff, where you would have former champions who didn't really have that much experience, but they would referee fights, sometimes high profile.
Yeah.
Joe Lewis soon after I think was the referee for Corey Frazier. I think Corey Frazier 201 or whatever. So
Jack Dempsey refereed fights. He refereed he refereed wrestling a lot too. Jack Dempsey was a popular wrestling referee for a while, even though he didn't get much into wrestling. But dude, that was a very common occurrence. Thankfully, after that, not so common. Jersey Joe, you fucked it up for everybody, bro.
Damn, I think by the 80s, you didn't really hear much more of it after that.
No, not that I could think of anyway. Well, another pretty good example, far more recent, but happened a little while back, but fresh enough on the brain that still kind of boils my blood a little bit. you had mentioned on Twitter that we were going to be doing this recording, and a handful of people had already popped up and talked about a number of things. I think someone might have mentioned this, but even if they hadn't, it's a pretty good example, and that's Russell Mora in the Abner Mares versus Joseph Agbeko 1 fight, dude. It was just bad. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen. No, that's not true. I've seen a lot of fights, so I've seen a lot of low blows. But I mean, I'm not entirely sure with something like that on the line that I've seen a referee so blatantly screw up and then be like just totally indignant about it in the ring, and then later on be like, yeah, that was my bad. I mean, dude, I loved that shit. That Showtime bantamweight tournament they had was so fun. It was had some really good fighters, had some extremely memorable fights, dude.
Oh yeah, man.
Yanni Perez basically killed his career in that fucking tournament. I mean, like that shit it was great. It was Victor Archinian, shit was great. And
That was a
then
nice little era for Showtime in the mid 2000s. The way they had that tournament was awesome.
for a handful of years, dude, they were like doing a tournament in like different weight classes. They kind of did a semi official cruiserweight tournament a few years before that. I mean, it was a lot of fun, dude. And
That was
so
under the Hirsch. That was under Hirschman, right? He was the one guy
I think
that
so,
was
yeah.
kind of behind all of that.
That was when they coined the fights not fighters thing, because
Yes.
HBO had taken in a whole bunch of fighters into their stable or whatever, and exclusive fighters, and they were like, we're not going to do exclusive, we're just going to sign fights, which for fans it probably didn't work out that great for them, to be honest, but for fans it worked out great.
Oh, for
um
sure.
but in any case, this Showtime bantamweight tournament had happened, and we're on the last leg of this tournament. It's the tournament final between Abner Mares and Joseph Agbeko. Joseph Agbeko is obviously on a tear and looking great. He was in his prime. He didn't look as good as he'd never looked that good, I should say, after this. Why? Who knows? But it was actually, what also really sucks about this is that it was a really fun fight. It was a great fight.
Mhm.
Good back and forth action, but Abner Mares, for whatever reason, just decided to start hitting low, dude. Like it was like he couldn't help himself. And then Russell Mora was just letting it happen. And then finally, the worst low blow happens and puts Agbeko down. And Mora started counting. And you could hear the crowd and then like the commentators. And then also when I looked on Twitter, because I was following on Twitter when this shit happened, and it was like an eruption. People were like, no, what the fuck? It was crazy, dude. It was bad. That was bad, especially considering everything that was on the line.
And I mean, I haven't watched it in years, but I remember watching it back then. It was awful, dude. Like, it wasn't just like a couple isolated incidents. We're talking, this was like he was Eusebio Pedrosa level of like fouling going on, bro. Like, this was like some bad shit, and it was blatant. Like in any other ref who wasn't blind to it all or had some kind of agenda or favoritism, whatever it may be, clearly would have disqualified Mares or taken a couple of points off and like very, 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 very like sternly warned him and probably like veered him to stop doing that type of shit. But Moore clearly didn't do that, and it's to the point where Mares still gets kind of joked about it today whenever he talks about it, sometimes while he's on the air or other stuff, because he knows it was bad. He knows he got a gift. Like, that was absurd. Like, Becko didn't retaliate. He didn't do anything. Like, he was just a victimized in that fight, bro. It was just one of the worst. Everything was stacked against him. When you have a referee that can't do anything for you, and you have a dude that's just freely wailing away on you like that, and there's nothing you can kind of do but just accept it and just try to fight back, dude. That's odd. You're not going to be able to come against.
Yeah, he was already kind of behind the 8 ball or whatever. He was basically having to fight an uphill battle, like Becko, that is, because Abner Mares is a very good fighter. And he was already, I think he was down in the first or second round, early in the fight, had to get up and fought his way back into the fight, looked as though he had pulled ahead, and then just started getting wailed on with low blows, dude. Just shit, total shit. And it sucked because, like I said, so much on the line. And Abner Mares was like kind of he didn't seem like he gave too much of a shit. And I mean, on one hand, it's like, why should he? He was allowed to do it. Like, I guess if that's me, I probably wouldn't be up there apologizing necessarily either. But Russell Mora was even trying to kind of like make excuses for it and shit. And I guess my only like personal touch I have on this shit is that night I actually I found Russell Mora's email through the Nevada State Athletic Commission website because they took it down the next day.
Did you email him and gave him and whip him a new one?
I emailed him, and I don't know, I probably could find like a screenshot of it somewhere, but I emailed his ass and he got back to me. He fucking responded, and he basically said something to the effect of, I know I messed up, I apologize, we're gonna have to have a hearing about it or something. And I was like, holy shit. And I remember I posted the screenshot, and it like, nobody really saw it at the time.
Early days of boxing Twitter, man, if anything, or whatever it was. Yeah.
But even then, I remember being like, holy shit, that seems like a monumentally awful idea, even responding to some random fucking guy. But okay, whatever. Anyway, yeah, that was bad.
I mean, it's better than you ever notice that whenever after a big fight, at least in the past few years, after a major fight, if like a referee really messes up or a judge really messes up, they suddenly have a Twitter handle and they're apologizing, saying that they know they screwed up on something, and then a bunch of people believe it.
Yeah, dude. The people content grifting off of shit, even just, I'm sorry to say this, but even off of what's going on in Ukraine, it's like, dude, how crazy. Many fucking posts do I need you to tell me that some fighter who's from Ukraine went back to Ukraine with some fake photo from 2016? Like, god damn it.
All the Klitschko photos, you mean?
Yeah, just a bunch of people like posting shit. Like, anyway, just content grifting off of that type of shit is just weird to me. But whatever, bro, go off. But yeah, I see that shit all the time. Everybody, there's like a Twitter account for everything. It's fucking, it's sick. Hilarious sometimes, but sick.
All right.
What's another refereeing performance we're highly regretting here?
All right, man, we're going back to the 1980s, the early 80s for this one. All right. So 80s were tumultuous already as it was. You know what I mean? There was a lot going on. There were major fights, major controversies. And sometimes those controversies involved the refs. So I got to bring up this guy named Joey Curtis. Do you know which fight I'm referencing?
I think so, yeah. Garcia.
Well, actually, I'm going to bring up a couple of them. One of them he's more known for than the other, actually, I would believe. But what's interesting about it is that they both go on the complete opposite ends of the spectrum of like why, that makes him a really, really bad ref, and just be like, what the hell's going on? So the first one we're going to bring up would be the first Michael Dokes-Mike Weaver fight, which when you watch it, and I wasn't even alive for it, but I mean, we've discussed it over the years. I'm so obsessed with this era in the division, everything I've seen in the bajillion times. And the more you watch it, the more you just kind of head scratch yourself. And like, even after the excuses that he makes, saying, well, the reason why he stopped the fight and everything, X, Y, and Z because of it, it still doesn't make any sense. And when you know that Don King was involved with it, and just the whole shenanigans involved, and there's so much stink that you can't just not mention that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, dude. And especially when you enter Don King into the equation, and especially if it's heavyweights in the 1980s, it's like,
And Michael Dokes at that point was one of Don King's pet projects. He loved Michael Dokes. He looked at Dokes like he was son. Dokes looked at him like he was dad. Dokes even mentioned that he styled his hair trying to look like Don King. And even though Larry Holmes was, promoted by Don King at that point, undisputed heavyweight champion, undefeated, yada, 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 Mike, they had a very tumultuous relationship. Larry was never Don King's favorite guy in his stable, even though he was his heavyweight champion. Mike, a guy like Michael Dokes, who wasn't trying to give him any type of fights about purses and this and that and all that, and more or less just kind of worship the guy, was perfect for Don. Plus, he was more flashy and kind of, had the same style that Don was into, a lifestyle. So they clicked, right? And So when Michael Dokes was being groomed and he was coming up on the come up, like, dude was unbelievable. I mean, I posted highlights of him on Twitter. You've seen it. Everybody's seen him. Like, Dokes is more known for the guy that was like more or less, when you talk about the lost era of the heavyweight division, he's almost a poster child of it, or one of them, because of his cocaine exploits and all this, his drugs and all this other stuff, and just completely wasted potential. Dude was completely shot in his mid-20s and just done from there. But we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about the early Michael Dokes. And early Michael Dokes really lived up to his nickname Dynamite. The dude was incredible to watch. Blazing hand speed for a heavyweight that just wasn't common. Like, speed that you would see in a welterweight and middleweight, he had a heavyweight. Had incredible power himself, just like really, really fast combinations. And he was tearing through the division. You know, he had a couple of like questionable fights here and there, like slumps, which kind of gave way to questions outside of how, you know, much he was really training. But whenever he had a rematch, like he fought a draw, for instance, with Ozzy Ocasio, which was kind of surprising. And Ocasio clearly out-hustled and probably should have got the decision. In a rematch, Dope blasted him out in the first round. So long story short, with Don King backing him, he built himself up to a high record, and he was getting ready to fight Mike Weaver, who was a WBA heavyweight champion. Mike Weaver, who we've discussed on previous shows, a guy that's, you know, a very, very hard luck dude, came up the hard way, finally broke through and knocked out John Tate in a shocking upset for the heavyweight championship, WBA title. And even though he was supposed to be like, you know, just an inept guy that was going to lose the belt quickly, he had it on for a couple of defenses. He beat Quick Tellis, who was undefeated at the time, and he scored that crushing knockout of Harry Coetzee. And, you know, he had momentum going there as being consensus, even though Larry Holmes was the man of the division, Weaver was up there. So this was definitely a high-profile fight. Here's the catch, though, too, right? Even though this fight was, you know, very high profile, a lot going on, it was going to be on HBO. Just a week or two before that was the big death of Ray Mancini and Duk Koo Kim. And that was still on the minds of everybody going on in the world, in boxing world, because that was obviously televised for the world to see. And with this fight so closely ahead and everything going through it, I mean, there was a lot going on. So what do you want to add to this?
No, dude, I think that's really good context, because that's exactly, dude, that fight, Mancini Kim, it influenced a lot of stuff.
It did.
It after that fight, the WBC, for instance, began instituting a mandatory EEC, you know, electroencephalogram, EEG, sorry, electroencephalogram brain scans before any championship fight. So that was a pretty big step toward fighter safety. I mean, obviously too late for Duk Koo Kim, unfortunately, but that fight, you know, for a number of reasons, it caused the networks to rethink their involvement in boxing. All of the networks, really, but particularly ABC and you know, or NBC, sorry, and I think it was NBC. Well, now whatever, it doesn't matter. Point is, whatever channel it was on was really rethinking its involvement in boxing, and so it also led to promoters and officials acting fearfully that they would be the ones that on their watch something like that would happen again.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And not just for the ethical reasons. You know, obviously they didn't want somebody to die. I'm sure that they weren't evil or malicious people, but that probably wasn't at the forefront. They don't want to be blamed for this shit. They don't want to be under the gun financially because a fighter died or they were found negligent on one of their shows, understandably. But that also affected some of the decisions made by the officials. And so for the most part, I think it was good. It probably led to some fighters not getting licensed and stuff like that. Some more stringent protocols for licensing. Mm-hmm. But in this particular case, and in the case of some other fights, especially fights that were thought of beforehand as like, it's going to be a really explosive fight, or it's a fight where it's two really hard hitters or something like that, then they have some big meeting. Well, remember Mancini Kim, can't be having that again. And by reports, that's exactly what happened for Joey Curtis
That's one. Yep,
on the
absolutely.
morning of Dokes Weaver one, was that they brought in Joey Curtis last minute, and that fight Mancini Kim was discussed, during the pre-fight meetings to figure everything out. And so that's not surprising. It's because it was effective. It was very powerful. And it was one of the first times I think that you could see a fighter death like live and in color. You know what I mean? And one of the first times that had really happened, perhaps not in color, but one of the first times it had really happened in the U.S., really notably, was obviously Emile Griffith versus Benny Perette, the third fight where, Benny Perette wound up dying. And that was extremely shocking to the public and whatnot. And I think that this was almost like PTSD, like deja vu. It happened again. And this time an even clearer, color, and it just was right there. So it was scary. And I think that at least inadvertently or subconsciously led to Joey Curtis jumping in and, jumping the gun in this case.
It was bad. So right off the jump, everybody knows Mike Weaver is a notoriously slow starter, and Michael Dokes is a very fast starter. And so right when he went, Dokes came right out there with a two-fisted attack, and before Weaver knew what hit him, which was usually the case, Dokes came in with a blazing left hook and dropped Weaver right on his ass. But again, Weaver's a slow starter, and he's a guy who has great recuperative power.
Yeah, he's pretty resilient.
Very. This isn't the first time he's been dropped. So he gets up and very clear-eyed, knows what's going on. He just got caught cold. No big deal. But Dokes came in and started flurrying because that's what he does. Very, very fast hands, and he was hitting him. Weaver got caught with a couple of punches, but if you're still watching him too, he knows what's going on. He's with it. He's just kind of riding the wave out until he can, regain his composure again. But out of nowhere, after a minute of this happening, only a few flurries in it, Joey Curtis suddenly jumps in and waves it off. Dokes jumps around, starts celebrating immediately. Weaver looks perplexed, almost like he's not even sure what just happened. You can tell he's still kind of like trying to gather what the hell, what do you mean the fight stopped? He didn't react inadvertently anything. He's just clearly in a shock. Everybody else around him though, they started going crazy because they thought they got screwed. And that's what the Don King factor.
You see fairly often, dude, like when somebody gets stopped and then moments later, they get stopped and then they're complaining, and moments later they go stumble, stumble, stumble. They're like, whoa, whoa, and clearly their legs aren't under them and the stoppage was fine. It's like they look clear-headed, but nah. And in this was not a case like that though, dude. He looked pretty clear-headed. He looked like he stopped it and he was like, what do you mean? What do you mean you're stopping it? It was
yeah.
I'm I know I got knocked down, but what the hell? And it just looked wrong, dude. It looked bad. And I think pretty much everybody obviously except for Dokes, acknowledged it and recognized it pretty quickly. It was not good.
Mm-hmm. Nah, man, that was it just screamed of corruption for everybody at that point. Whether it was or not, or Joey Curtis just freaked out and panicked, who knows? You know what I mean? But again, with Don King being involved, Dokes' background, the whole everything about it, and Mike Weaver clearly, being able to continue and everyone agreeing with that, it made a bad situation. So right off the jump, you hear everyone screaming, bullshit, bullshit, like you would hear normally. And then that chant starts turning into Don King sucks, Don King sucks. And it kind of goes from there, but it prompted the WBA to make an immediate rematch, which they did have. And Weaver again kind of got screwed because it was a very good fight, and it made for a cool backdrop because it kind of happened in the early evening, afternoon outside, and it was filmed there, and it was a good fight. But Weaver, fought a draw with him, and after that, you already know the way those two career paths went. But what I was going to mention though was that the other end of the spectrum, and this is completely wild because even though he got kind of panicky and spooky and jumped in and early, made an early stoppage for Dokes Weaver, I was going to bring up the Wilfredo Gomez Derrick Holmes fight from 1980.
Yeah, and it's that's something that has also happened with Richard Steele, where
Mhm.
like obviously everybody complains about Chavez Taylor, and I mean I suppose that's another one we could talk about, although it's been done to death. We probably don't need to talk about it too much. Regardless, Richard Steele also has other performances where he clearly did not jump the gun and probably should
Yeah.
have jumped the gun a little sooner. So I mean, that's why it's so wild that you could have a refereeing performances, on like that opposite of the spectrum or
Yeah,
whatever.
that opposite of the spectrum completely. And so think about this, like Derrick Holmes, Wilfredo Gomez, this for obviously Wilfredo Gomez at that point, one of the absolute baddest junior featherweight champions in history. Dude was just an absolute monster of his time. And Derrick Holmes was a Sugar Ray Leonard. He trained with Sugar Ray Leonard coming up. I mean, a very, very talented boxer from Maryland. Obviously not as well known, but Leonard talked great about him in his autobiography. And if you were a fan back in the early 80s and the 70s and kind of followed the East Coast scene, especially in the Maryland scene or whatever, you definitely would have heard of Derrick Holmes. And very, very good fighter. So the catch with this fight was that Holmes, and I read about this when he was profiled as a new face in Ring Magazine, knocked out Wilfredo Gomez in the World Championships in the first round. So when they had a rematch, Gomez was a very, very prideful guy and a guy who carried a chip on his shoulder and kind of arrogant, was coming to look out for some revenge. You know what I mean? And Holmes, very feeling confident himself, knowing that he knocked out Gomez in the first round when they fought as amateurs, thought he could take him out pretty quickly. And what turned out as kind of a firefight in the first round or so became an absolute just mugging, bro, like a really, really bad beatdown that ended with Holmes getting dropped 8 times over 5 rounds. And it wasn't just like knockdowns to the point where you'd be like, quick flash knockdowns. Holmes was legitimately going down on himself by himself, trying to like
Getting beaten
show that
down.
he wants to stop. He was bad.
Yeah.
And Joey Curtis wouldn't stop it. Gomez was punking him every time you would hit him. You go over and start bagging him down. Dude. It's hard to watch.
I was going to say that's another thing too, is that like Gomez the entire time was like doing that type of shit like Fernando Vargas did, like where he'd knock it down.
Yeah,
and
when
like,
he knocked down Ross Thompson
yeah. And Thompson said he spat on him or something. But doing shit like that. And on top of that, Wilfredo Gomez was a fighter who, I mean, no shit talk. I'm just saying, just talking facts. The fool was a hit you while you were down, elbow you, forearm you type of fighter. He was just
a hothead like Terry Norris. Absolutely.
Yes, he wanted to hurt you. He wanted to fuck you up, and he fought like it too. And that's exactly how he fought Derrick Holmes. Derrick Holmes was actually a really good amateur. DC, the DC area has, I couldn't talk about now, but historically it's had some really good fighters and really good amateurs. Baltimore area, et cetera. It's that area and the surrounding areas has historically had some really good fighters. And Derrick Holmes was a really good amateur. But yeah, man, Wilfredo Gomez was not playing that night, dude. He just was thumping the shit out of him. That was bad.
It was really bad, and no referee would ever allow that to go on the way it did, especially when you get dropped 4 times in
last
a round.
Like 2 knockdowns. It was almost like you could hear the crowd like, "Hey, come on, dude! Like, what are you doing?" It was bad.
And then you find out afterwards his jaw was completely shattered. He like chipped one of his teeth were broken. Like Gomez beat the hell out of him.
Yeah, the fact that he kept going that long is like, damn.
Yeah, I mean, very, very brave, but like that ruined him. His career was ruined after that completely. He never recovered from that. And Joey Curtis is the one that let that go on. So it's wild to think when you go, like you mentioned, the opposite ends of the spectrum, when you stop a fight so soon and create that much controversy. And then a fight that's been more or less forgotten today when you think about it, considering it's been almost 42 years since it happened. But still, if you watch it, and it's on YouTube, so if you've never seen it, if you got the stomach for it, check it out. You'll see what I mean. It's crazy.
Yeah, dude, it's pretty bad.
So that's why I wanted to bring them up. I thought that was, worthy.
No, for sure. Like at the very least, perplexing shit. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Yeah, I would say that's a pretty good like, you know, opposite end of the spectrum example, I was going to bring one up that I actually didn't even think about until I just did a brief look, because I was like, all right, I just want to have some examples just in case, you know, because I don't know how quickly we'd be able to go through them because there's a lot. But I actually had to look up his name too, because it's not just the referee from this fight, but he was a big reason why this fight was so fucked up. And that's Danny Williams versus Konstantin Erich from 2009, 2008. So I also couldn't tell you if there's video of it up right now. I'll look in a moment to let everybody know, but this happened, and at the time video had come out and it was being kind of passed around on message boards and stuff like that. And Danny Williams, who by this time everybody knew as the guy who beat Mike Tyson, right? Like everyone was kind of like, what the hell? You know, he was being brought in for Mike Tyson to beat, and he wound up turning the tables and beating Mike Tyson. And that was kind of his claim to fame at this point, even though on the British level, he was a very well-known heavyweight and had a number of performances even by this time where he had kind of like, you know, pulled a fight by his bootstraps out of the fire or whatever you want to call it. And he was known as a guy who was very mid-level, but could be exciting. Long story short, this fight happened in Spain, and the promoter of the fight is a guy named Ahmed Oner, who is, I believe, Turkish. And in his own right is like his own crazy ass story. Go look him up. But he had promoted this fight. Danny Williams winds up in the second round getting a point deducted for low blows. It's pretty dubious. You know, it doesn't really get much of a warning, and then gets a point deducted for low blows. Third round, it's almost looks as if like the ring, he's having trouble like with like water in the ring or something like that, because he's losing his footing and he's slipping all around the ring and winds up slipping and getting a couple of like standing 8 count type of things. And then in the fourth round gets another standing 8 count when he slips, and it's like a clear slip, and the ref just walks over and starts counting and shit. Anyway, he gets deducted another point the following round in the fifth round. And then in the sixth round is when it starts really fucking getting wild, right? Because Danny Williams is obviously down several points by this time. Konstantin Erich, who is like not a very good fighter, but Danny Williams is just totally shitting the bed here. And so Konstantin Erich comes into the sixth round and starts just getting beaten down because Danny Williams out of nowhere is like, oh, you know, I'm going to start fighting. And he starts kicking his ass. And then with not even half of the round had gone down. It was like a minute, 40 seconds left. Ahmed Oner runs over to the bell and rings the bell for the fucking to sound the end of the round. And I mean, that's obviously not the referee, but it would just kind of devolved into total fucking chaos at this point. And the following round, Danny Williams picks up where he left off and finally stops Konstantin Erich. And like, there's some manner of fucking justice and karma here. But the refereeing performance starts out bad, and then the promoter running in to ring the bell just kind of puts the cherry on top. So now that I have gone through all of that, I'm going to have to look to see if this fight is even on fucking YouTube, because if it is, it's worth watching. Yeah, it sure is. Thank goodness. There we go. So go verify what I'm talking about, because it's fucking wild, bro.
Absolutely, man. I've never actually watched that, but I know I've read about that early on, a little bit about it. I didn't know too much. The one that everybody likes to bring up about Danny Williams, obviously, besides the Mike Tyson fight, is the one that he incredibly, you know, when his dislocated shoulder ended up scoring a knockout.
Yeah, dude, he had a couple of crazy battles with a fellow British kind of like journeyman-ish level dude named Michael Sprott, who was you know, that was, I will admit, dude, I'm not going to say I'm like a British heavyweight fucking expert or anything like that, but that era, like late 90s to mid 2000s, late 2000s, was a pretty fun era, if not super high level, fun era for British heavyweight boxing.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't say the same for myself either. So
yeah, but that's good shit. So it's good to know that it is indeed, thank goodness, on it is indeed, thank goodness, on YouTube. So go check that shit out. But that being said, dude, I literally, and I'm not kidding here, I'm not lying, I have a list like an absolute list of shit that Lawrence Cole has done. So, I mean, I don't know if that guy needs his own episode. I mean, he really might. I'm not even kidding. Just look going down
I
this
mean,
list.
absolutely, man.
It's
We've
amazing.
hazed him so many times on the show before, and yeah, he's worthy of his own induction at this point.
Dude, this fight has actually unfortunately been taken down from YouTube since I wrote this shit, because I wrote it several years ago. But fucking Dominic Carter versus Rocky Gannon, that should happen on USA.
Wow, that's a good one, man. Because you
Yeah.
know what? I want to say I have that on VHS. My dad recorded at one point. I'm gonna have next time I go.
It's
visit
from
him,
USA. Yeah.
look.
They took it down off of YouTube. It was on YouTube when I wrote this shit, but this was actually the first like awful
Rocky
performance.
Gannon, man, that was the man.
That was actually Lawrence Cole. That's what I'm saying, is that was the first awful performance by Lawrence Cole, bro. So this shit happened December of 1996. But it was, I mean, he could have had a poor performance before that, but it was only his 31st fight that he had refereed, which, I mean, like, usually referees ref like a lot more fights than that before making it to kind of like a TV main event. Fucking, you know, I mean, whatever. We already know why, but I'm just saying, you know, it's possible, I suppose, for that to happen. That being said, you know, like moments into the fight, left hook floors Carter, you know, Gannon floors Carter, and then let's see, there's knockdowns. Basically, Cole starts, you know, issuing knockdowns and like basically going to the timekeeper to get answers about what's going on. Cole stops the action, deducts a point from Gannon for hitting a downed opponent. Just over a minute remaining in round one, he breaks a clinch, deducts a point from Carter, doesn't explain why, and then basically just, you know, everything resorts to fucking chaos, basically. And without issuing a count, Cole steps in and stops the fight, despite Gannon's protests after he's been, you know, like basically dinged up a little bit. And that was 1996. That's kind of where it all began. And like I said, the fight's been taken off of YouTube, but it's a terrible, terrible performance from Lawrence Cole. And the guy's still refereeing, dude. Still refereeing 26 years later. Terrible stuff, man.
I mean, when you got influence with the commission, with your family, and all the other stuff, can you really go away? And not only that, too, how many new people are they really trying to train up out there when they still have the respect, when they still have the veterans they can keep on using? It seems like they do that in Nevada and everywhere else too. Wow, we still got these old judges. Let's just keep on using that.
Well, I guess, you know, that's its own conversation, but I would be curious, because Texas is without a doubt one of the more busy combat sports states, especially for boxing. And if they can't get fucking new blood, if they can't get people, you know,
you got Lawrence Cole as the golden standard of their refs.
Yeah, I mean, that is not a good sign for the rest of the state commissions if they're having trouble. But who knows?
You got a guy that we have to bring this one up too, just because we're talking about him for a minute. I mean, when Juan Manuel Marquez, what was it? When he had that gash on his eye fighting Himmerich
Yep.
Jaka, is that his last name?
Haka, Jaka, whatever. I don't know. Yeah.
And then he goes, "Oh, hey, by the way, you're winning the fight, all right, on the judges' scorecards."
He covers it up.
Get out, you can.
Yeah, he covers up his lapel microphone, his fucking, you know, his pocket microphone, and he goes, "Hey, come here, Wani."
Yeah.
You fucking dick. What are you talking about?
Like they're buddies. Oh yeah. You're winning the fight, by the way. You know?
There's actually a really good one. I mean, it wasn't good for Terence Lewis, but it was good for Michael Moore. That shit was in 2001. Michael Moore basically Michael Moore, when he's kind of on his comeback in 2001, Terence Lewis, who's, you know, a noted you know, journeyman heavyweight level, you know, guy.
He was a fun guy. Yeah. You know what? He had promise early on as a prospect. He was featured as such, you know, tough Philadelphia guy. He had good power, but then it was quickly realized that he had absolutely no chin whatsoever.
Yeah. So, and kind of like a sparring partner kind of mentality type of thing.
Yeah.
And this shit was on ESPN too. And Moore, right toward the end of round two, I mean, like, he drills the shit out of Terence Lewis as his back is turned and he's draped over the ropes. Like, he's draped over the ropes and his back is turned, and Moore drills his ass and knocks him cold. And Cole just doesn't even blink. He's just like, okay, that's it. Good fight. Knocked him out. Cool. Good job. I mean, wowzers, bro. I'm not kidding. I have a literal fucking list of this fool's exploits. Leha Ward, Vernon Forrest, Shane Mosley, Pacquiao Barrera 1, Marquez Haka, Chris John Rocky Juarez, Juan Diaz Malinaji 1, Andre Durrell Arthur Abraham, Pacquiao Margarito, Maidana Broner, Orlando Salido Lomachenko, Francisco Vargas, Will Tomlins. I mean, bro, the list literally goes on.
Like I said before, like I always love to quote this song. What do the whispers say? And the beat goes on.
La da 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 dee. That shit is awful, bro. He's terrible.
He's look,
He's
man.
terrible.
You got Lawrence Cole in Texas, and you got Arthur Mercanti Jr. in New York. You know what I mean? Choose your poison.
Yeah, dude. Choose your fighter. Somebody's gonna get somebody killed. Yeah. Choose them.
So I'm not even gonna try to like go in on a Mercanti rant either to try to to bring up the East Coast, because we already know what all the things he's done.
Ruddock Dokes, yeah. You were telling was it Yuri Foreman to suck it up, champ? You're a champion.
Or just letting Michael Dokes get his head knocked into the nosebleed section of Madison Square Garden, or the list goes on and on and on of what he's done. You know what I mean? But yeah, Mercanti sucks. But all right, here's one for you. Do you remember the Juan Martin Koji Eder Gonzalez?
Yes.
Their first fight.
I don't know that referee's name, but it was
Isidro Garcia. Excuse me, not Garcia. Isidro Rodriguez.
An extremely memorably bad referee, but like criminal, corrupt, awful.
Lee Groves, I wish he'd be on the show actually to mention this, but I think he's gone on the record or said a few times the saying that was one of the most corrupt. It's one of the most blatant forms of corruption you could literally see in plain sight. Like not even pro wrestling sometimes gets this wild with like it is. It was something you would clearly see out of the Bobby Heenan playbook or some shit. You know what I mean? Like it was that type of level of bad.
Yeah. Like, like they're going in for a clinch and the referee's like, like smacking to push them off
like,
and shit.
That type of thing like there. But no, man, it was incredible. So it was, I want to say the second or third round, Eder Gonzalez, who Koji was getting the better of him early on, but he walked into an absolute monstrous punch, like a monster punch.
Yeah, it is. And Koji, just gone.
Yeah, to give a little back context, Koji was a long-reigning junior welterweight champion from that started reigning in the late 80s, and at this point by 1993, he was one of those guys that he wasn't featured on American television, but he was a
huge celebrity in Italy.
Yes, huge in Argentina and everything. Yeah, he was a big dude, very, very well known. So Argentine boxing too, especially as you talk about the 80s and 90s, they've always had wild crowds. You remember Luis, what was it, Luis Lizarraga or Zarago? Where the riots took place, that guy. So, and other stuff like that, those type of situations, like it's always been kind of a hostile territory to go travel over to fight. But Koji really, really, really had partial treatment every time he fought. It was tough to beat him. And Gonzalez had him completely knocked out. Any other place this fight would have taken place, Koji would have been stopped completely. Like he was out. It was almost like exaggerated how he got dropped in this fight. And to his credit, he kind of beats the count, you know what I mean? But he's done. And the referee, like all of a sudden, Koji's handlers like grab him up and pull him up and like do the, try to like hold him up, and Isidro Garcia like stops it and gives him time. Like I'm not even giving this justice to really explain it the way it is, but like it is the most surreal thing you'll ever see. They've clearly just like after Koji is knocked out, they like in the middle of the round they stop it and they just give him time to continue. So and they like wash him down, and they don't give an explanation that it was anything. No, it's more or less they're just like, you know what, we got to give him time because he just got hurt. Like it's crazy. And, Gonzalez thought he originally won the fight. Anybody else would have thought they won the fight the way they ended up. But no, they were just like,
yeah, dude.
I can't even finish my sentence, bro. This shit's crazy. Like still talking about it.
Yeah, he's the way that he was treated was like they were trying so badly to protect the guy.
I mean, absolutely. that wasn't in the script for him to lose. You know what I mean? It was supposed to be a routine title defense. And Gonzalez dropped him hard. Koji was out on his feet. He gets up, but his brain is on another planet, man. It might as well have been on Mars. And Gonzalez comes in, lands a few more punches on him. Koji falls into the corner. Koji's handlers just jump up to try to stop it, what should have been an automatic disqualification on itself. And they kind of like yoke him up, grab him up. Gonzalez gets a few more hits on him, like unprotected, which certainly didn't help Koji's brain. And everybody just kind of jumps in at that point, and then like a mass confusion arises. Gonzalez thinks he won the fight, rightfully so. And then everybody is just kind of like, no. And then you realize, wait, what? No, they're stopping and they're holding up and they're giving Koji time. Why? Like, what are they doing here? It was insanity.
Yeah, dude. I don't know. All I can tell you is that like I said, he was extremely popular because he made a few defenses in Italy. And I mean, I talk about this a little bit in, I guess I'll go ahead and right over here, my book right here. I talk about the Italy Argentina connection, that so many Argentinians or Argentines, however you want to express that, are from, or their families are from Italy. They have Italian roots. And that was something that Oscar Bonavena had actually talked about, going and fighting in Italy. And I think that he fought in Italy once or twice. But point is, Juan Koji was a huge star in Italy when he had gone back there to fight. And for whatever reason, I don't know why. Maybe it's that, but I connect that in my brain with like what was his Vincenzo Cantatore, Michele Picarillo, for whatever reason, dude. And I'm not trying to stereotype, because I know that like boxing's not massive in Italy, like that's not necessarily their sport, but every single time they've gotten a big fighter, they want to protect those dudes. They really want to protect them so badly. Vincenzo Cantatore was like notorious for looking for referee help, and he even tried to do it against Wayne Braithwaite and wound up getting fucking blasted for it too. I don't know if you remember that. Like he's like looking away.
Did you mention Vincenzo Nardiello? He was another one of the super middleweight from that era too, who was notorious. Every time he got hit really hard or anything, to cry wolf and hold on.
I don't know what I'm not trying to like stereotype, but I mean, check.
You're not wrong though, bro. I mean, this is what was written about back then. I read the same things.
We've seen it for our own eyes, so it's not like we're making it up. But it's I don't know why. So for whatever reason, I think it's just that awful refereeing performance, and the way that Koji gets protected is just like, for me, it's just like they just in my brain equation.
It was awful, man. This was literally something you would see in wrestling where the referee turns heel and was going to become a manager or something like that. But like, Isidro Rodriguez, if this was wrestling, the way he screwed him over would have became part of Koji's entourage after that. And a guy that, a little weasel that people would have been chasing to beat up while they're trying to get through. You know what I mean?
That's you've been hiding under the ring and like feeding people shit to hit them.
Yeah, like doing one of those type of guys. Like that's exactly what would have happened. That's how blatantly bad this was.
Yeah.
Imagine if this fight happened during the Twitter era, when you can everybody has a link and you can watch this live. The whole Twitter boxing would have absolutely imploded watching this. Imploded. And probably would have got a better deal than what poor Edgar Gonzalez ended up getting out of this. I mean, he did get an immediate rematch in America in Las Vegas. But he ended up getting stopped. And it was a legitimate stoppage. I mean, it was a fun fight for while it lasted. But, Koji, for all of his faults and for all of his controversies, everything was a fun fighter to watch. So,
yeah, not the strongest fighter, but definitely a fun fighter.
But that wasn't even his work. That wasn't even his last controversy. And I'm not going to veer off too quick, but like, it's on YouTube, and one our favorite account that we're always pushing videos off of each other on, Jay Seklau.
Yeah,
he posted it recently. The rematch between Koji and Frankie Randall. And that's another one for controversy. Koji gets hit with a headbutt. I mean, it was decent, but not one that should have done the damage it clearly did to him. So Koji pulls a Luis Santana, falls out. Yeah, he's laying there. He won't move. He's unconscious. Mass confusion. Freddie Pacheco is going back and forth of whether he's being real or fake because he has no idea. Everybody else doesn't know what the hell is going on. And then the most surreal scene you will ever see in your life. Koji is being stretchered out with an oxygen mask on. And then you see Koji's kid and Koji's manager and the rest of his entourage celebrating in the ring that he's champion again, running around while the dude's being stretchered out.
Yeah, dude, I'm gonna tell you, there aren't many things in the ring that get me, but dudes faking fouls is just like,
That's yeah.
I'm never gonna root for that person ever.
No, nor should you. But to make it even more so, you like, guys, if you really want to like show that you're trying to like make this a real thing, why don't you act like you're showing your concern for your cat?
Look distraught, something.
Yeah, look distraught instead of running around the ring
something.
celebrating and going crazy while the guy's being stretched out with the oxygen mask.
Yeah, like take the belt, but be like, oh, okay, I guess I'll take it. Yeah.
Yeah, nah.
Come on.
Kid was literally up there holding the strap up, being held up on the shoulders, and everyone was running around celebrating.
Terrible stuff. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it is about Mr. Koji, but he had a couple of those controversies where he just act a little.
But that had to be brought up, man. That was a big one.
That's a good one. He's a good one. Now I'll take it back to 1904 with this one. We got a couple of other older ones that we could definitely talk about, but I'll talk about 1904 and the welterweight title. One of the shortest, well, probably the shortest welterweight title reign on record. And Dixie Kid, the welterweight champion, slash non-welterweight champion. Yeah, pretty wild stuff, dude. So you had a fight between Joe Walcott, the original Joe Walcott, Barbados Joe Walcott, he's often referred to, and Dixie Kid. And this happened in Woodward's Pavilion in San Francisco, which in the early 1900s was one of the main pavilions or main fight venues in San Francisco. And I'll just be brief about it just so people can understand, because by this time in the early 1900s, fighting was far more established. Professional fighting, or if not professional fighting, fighting that was staged for money, which was not necessarily full-on professional fighting by that point, was far more developed on the East Coast than it was on the West Coast. And on the West Coast, it was still fighting banning in some places. And in Northern California, it was one of the few places where nobody was really going to bother you if you held a professional prize fight. And Woodward's Pavilion was one of the places where you would be holding it. And so in any case, Joe Walcott, Barbados Joe Walcott, takes the welterweight title. He's a very well-known fighter by this point, hard-hitting guy, a guy who's known for handling much bigger fighters, and also a guy who's had to come up the hard way and is just, basically a monster in the ring. Very hard puncher, very skilled fighter. And they're scheduled for 20 rounds against Dixie Kid. And in the 20th round, pretty much out of nowhere, the referee, a guy named Dick Sullivan, just, abruptly declares that Joe Walcott has fouled Dixie Kid, and Dixie Kid is now the welterweight champion. And so that's now you think about somebody winning the title on a foul, and it's that's not really that could happen. It's not common, but it happens. It's not rare. At this point, that shit was super fucking rare. Fights just didn't championships did not get turned over or handed over on a foul, because that was specifically what some of these rules and stuff were written to avoid, because they the no contests and shit like that. That's why no contests were handed out the way that they were, and no decisions. If referee felt that the two fighters were not putting up a good enough effort, he'd say, fuck this, you guys aren't getting paid, and declare it a no contest. I mean, now that obviously couldn't happen, but back then that was a fairly common occurrence. And so in the 20th round of a 20-round fight, this referee, Dick Sullivan, just walks over to Dixie Kid and raises his hand, and the crowd's like, what are you talking about? What the fuck are you talking about? Everybody goes their separate ways, except for Dick Sullivan is basically, shunned from town, does not have a good time during this, because you have to think about this. And I'm sorry for the long explainer, but just to kind of set the stage, these fighters are getting paid based off of what people are betting ringside. We're not talking about guaranteed purses in 1904, and especially for two black fighters. We're talking about fighters who are getting paid based off of what the betting is like, you know, going around ringside, because people aren't going to be betting across town for a fight that's happening over here. You know, this is only just, you know, people in attendance. And so most of the time, their purses are going to be based in some part on this. And in any case, that means the money gets screwed up. People who are putting bets on the fight get screwed up. You know, you could still bet throughout the fight in some places, like going into the final round, you could still place bets on who you thought was going to win, et cetera, et cetera. All of those people got their money fucked up by this referee who walked over out of nowhere and raised the dude's hand. And so when you think about it in that way, yeah, people are pissed. People are like, are you fucking shitting me, bro? Like, this is where the money's made. You know, like,
people died for much less back then.
Exactly. So Dick Sullivan is, you know, if you see the photos from the fight, they're on BoxRec and they're probably on other places as well. Dude looks pretty schleppy. He's just in a fucking, you know, this fool looks like he rolled out of the mining camp. He does not look like he's in any. And if you see other fights from around this time, motherfuckers are wearing like top hats and like suits and shit. You know, he looked like they just dragged him out of the fucking cot from around the corner. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't really seem like that far-fetched that this dude was up to no good. Turns out they found out sometime later, I think it was maybe a day or two later, they found out that Dick Sullivan, somehow they found out that he had bet on the fight and that he had bet on Dixie Kid. I mean, if the guy had just done this in like round 14 instead of at the last minute in round 20, like a real fucking idiot, maybe he'd gotten away with it, but he didn't. He did it in the most obvious way he possibly could. So he got caught. He got fucked up.
Oh man. You know what I love too is that the video, the only video I know of Barbados Joe Walcott that's been posted up on YouTube of him, you know, as a janitor, and he's kind of
That's good.
It's so good, man. You know, and Walcott's one of those guys that I wish there was footage of, even if it would be as grainy as shit, but just like, because the way he's described, the way everyone, you know, they talk about his style, you read accounts from back then, he seems like a type of style that definitely would have translated well in other eras, you know? So aggressive,
you know, good power. Yeah. Like that's timeless. You know what I mean? Like, that's a skill that's timeless.
And like the way he just seems so happy to like to talk in that thing too, like when he's being videotaped. Oh, hello,
he's like excited.
Why y'all do it? Yeah, he's really hyped, you know, when he's going through, and he was like, I still wish I was making that money, fighting with the rest of the boys. Like they're almost like all of his friends he's talking about. Like instead of them just beating the hell out of each other, like they're all just buddies, you know, in the same profession.
I mean, in a way, they were.
Myself on those Rolls Royces, but yeah,
dudes all in the same company who just retired, you know. Kind of a, it's almost like how it's a good video. I know that's on YouTube.
It is.
I think somebody colorized it.
And it's been colorized, which is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, fools are getting skilled with this colorization, and you know, our buddy Smooth Legends is hooking it up with some incredible, you know, cleaned up footage of fights that are like 100, 110 years old that are incredible. It's good shit.
Dude, we just talked about the Dempsey Furpo footage that he's posted up, and that's the cleanest I've ever seen it. You know, definitely, dude. It's awesome to watch. The footage he put up with Fitzsimmons Corbett, where I can actually see punches being landed instead of it kind of being like a weird, like Pong looking glitch. It's cool. So
yeah, for sure.
But let's hop a decade ahead from what you just mentioned to bring up one of the more controversial fights during that time period with a very controversial referee who we found out was buddies with the lightweight champion we're about to mention. So we're talking about referee Jack Welch and Ad Walgas against Mexican Joe Rivers, 1912.
Yeah, it's one of the more classic series of fight photographs. And then of course we found out years later there was some video of it. Thank goodness. Fuck. But even the
and
video,
that's again, we've discussed, man, how is there footage of that yet we can't find footage of Harry Greber?
Yeah, how is that? Makes no sense. That makes no sense. But
that's what makes me even more like fascinated by it and wants me to learn more.
Somebody's got it. Yeah, bullshit. Somebody's got something. They're just holding out, bastards.
But yeah, dude, and in that photo that you're talking about with Rivers on the canvas, looking up with this sad, like confused look on his face, like what's going on, and Walgas being dragged away by referee Welsh while he's still counting out Rivers. It's mind-boggling.
And it's like, dude, I mean, yeah. So you got Mexican Joe Rivers, who, by the way, wasn't even Mexican, I don't think. So the good old racist early 20th century. But nonetheless, you have Mexican Joe Rivers, who had come up and was basically discovered on accident, got into boxing on accident because somebody needed a guy to fight. I mean, how many stories do we have like that? Tons and tons. But he got into fighting just on a whim, basically. And Ad Wolgast was an absolute animal, just a brutal maniac in the ring, and an incredible lightweight champion during an era where just jammed full of incredible lightweights, not only because of their skill and the depth and whatnot, but it was a hard time. Motherfuckers were tough.
Dude, these were just
40,
tough guys,
45 round fights. Yeah, I mean, if it was a 15 or 20 round fight, it was a shorter fight. So, I mean, it's when you put that into context.
They fought so often too.
Oh, yeah, it's just not, it's no wonder that era, like right around the 30s, 40s, 50s, when those fighters were getting old, if they had survived, that's no wonder why those fighters had some of the worst times in terms of their later years.
Oh my God, man.
Having
the
to live in
stories that came out about
Walgas
battling Nelson and others. I mean, just read Trish Dixon's book, because he alludes to a lot of those guys. I mean, he mentions Nelson and Walgas and others, but there was a lot of other fighters from that era who weren't publicized too much that definitely suffered the same fate as those. They all of them, more or less, at that time, if they survived that long.
The combination of tiny gloves and fucking going dozens of rounds,
and the activity and just, it was crazy.
Just incredible, dude. I mean, and it's no wonder what that would do to a body. But Ad Wolgast during this era nonetheless excelled. It was beating the crap out of most of the other better lightweights for the most part, and winds up getting matched with Mexican Joe Rivers. And they know that this is going to be an explosive contest going into this fight. Like everybody knew, because Mexican Joe Rivers was a hard charging, hard hitting dude, and Ad Wolgast, that was the only way he fought. That was the absolute only way he fought, was going forward and tearing shit up. So they knew that this was going to be a good fight going in.
Oh, absolutely, and exactly like it was. It was kind of tooth and nail from the get go. What Rivers actually looked like, I've seen from all accounts, was getting the better of it. And it was a really, really tough fight. Walgas, Rivers was slightly ahead for this cleaner punch, but Walgas, like you said, his aggression was coming at him. But then everything kind of culminated around round 13, and this was the moment that brings the controversy in there. So there's differing accounts. The one that's more prevalent with everybody is that with most accounts is that Walgas, Rivers landed a punch, like a right hand, I think it was, that knocked Walgas clean out. Simultaneously, as Rivers landed a knockout punch, Walgas landed a low blow. Excuse me. Others have said that he landed a punch that was a legal punch too, that knocked Rivers out, but a lot of people say it was a low blow. And if you watch the way Rivers crouches and grabs himself and goes down, he's kind of he's holding his groin, so it definitely looks like it would be a low blow. But regardless, Walgas gets hit with a shot, Rivers gets hit at the same time, and they both go down. Walgas on top of Rivers, and Walgas is out. And referee Jack Welsh, who was known later on as a friend of Walgas and had refereed previous fights during the Walgas fights and others, he was a very, very popular referee during that time period, came over, and the first thing he did was, as we mentioned, he grabs Walgas, pulls him up. He starts counting simultaneously, like you would see in Rocky 2, but then out of nowhere, he grabs Walgas and he keeps on counting. And then that's when the photo comes up. You said Rivers kind of looking up, going, wait, what? And 5, 6, 7, blah, 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 blah. And then he pulls him up, and then he raises the hand and says, Walgas is the winner, and he gets the hell out of Dodge before anyone realizes really just what happened, and they start rioting.
I actually wrote about this a number of years ago. And I mean, I wrote like a pretty long article about it. I'm sure if you
should, because it's pretty awesome.
And it's should look it up just because it gives a lot of backstory as far as like the fighter's backstory. But I'll read a couple quotes because I included quotes from the original newspaper articles just to give people an idea. This was Owen R. Bird from the Los Angeles Times. The pace had been ferocious from the opening bell, and toward the end of the 13th, the fury was redoubled. Then this thing happened. Both fighters suddenly lay writhing on the floor together, almost in a heap. The referee seemed to be trying to count out Rivers and help add Walgas to his feet in a confused sort of way. Rivers had apparently been fouled, but after a moment's hesitation, the referee began to count over him. It took Jack Welch 8 seconds to count out Rivers after he had been fouled and render a decision, besides helping the fallen champion to his feet. The gong rang as he finished the downward stroke of the 5 count. As for the fight, there never was a better one in the Vernon area. And then trainer at the Los Angeles Athletic Club, DeWitt Van Court, said to the LA Times, I saw Walgast hit Rivers a hard left hand in the groin as plain as I ever saw anything. I believe Rivers had hit him square in the stomach and knocked his wind out. I also believe Rivers was entitled to a decision on a foul. So, I mean, depending, I suppose, on who you believe, basically that's how it went. But the point is, this fight is often cited as one of the very few double knockout fights, but I guess it didn't really go quite that way. It should have been given to Mexican Joe Rivers, but it goes down in history as one of the more infamous fights.
And the first time I read about this fight was in a Ring magazine in 96 it was, because Mike Tyson was on the cover, as he was on most of those covers back then. But they were talking about the different controversies in boxing history, and they were given like 2 sides of the story. They would give you one side of like, yes, it was fixed, and the other side it was, no, it wasn't fixed. You know what I mean? But that was the first one that they featured, and that was the first photo that they featured of Rivers looking up, and they were talking the whole story about it.
It's a great photo.
Oh, it's an amazing photo. I mean, if I had an original of it, I would frame that shit up and have it hanging as a prominent piece in my place.
Yeah, it's a great photo.
Another one though that he did referee, I'm not gonna mention it, but I mean it's interesting to mention, is that because he was boys with Walgas, they were known to be like kind of chummy, if not like best friends. But I think he refereed the fight against Owen Moran as well, right?
That's another great photo.
Well, yeah, because Moran, oh my God, man, who was a very, very, very tough guy who knocked out battling Nelson himself, which is a
great fighter in his own right. Yeah,
great fighter in his own right. But Walgas, like you said, the rampaging maniac that he was, just kind of broke him. And you see Moran laying there with his mouth agape, just open, and his eyes almost like exploding out of his head while he's like holding his stomach. And Walgas,
yeah, looking over him like he's like, get the fuck up. Yeah,
dude.
It's just Wolgast was like a lightweight version of Ketchel or something, just a little maniac.
Another style that would, like, even though he would probably get pieced up by the best guys today, but just in terms of pure aggression, everything, if Mayorga was successful, a dude like Walgas definitely would have been too, in his own way. If he could handle, not fouling.
Yeah, that would be the challenge, is kind of reining him in just a little bit. There's another really good old-timey one, but I'll leave that to you. I was going to just say, because this opens up just an easy conversation, especially because he's far more recent. I'm just going to throw him out there in general, because it's like a whole load. There's a fucking smorgasbord that you can, he's no Lawrence Cole, but he's not that far from it. And that's Joe Cortez. How this guy,
fair but firm.
how this guy, he's one of those figures in boxing where, I totally understand why some people get a shitload of respect. I'm like, oh yeah, because he did this, or she did this. But then there are other times when people get like a shitload of respect, and they're like, people are like, oh, yeah, he's the best in the business. And I'm like, really? And he's one of those reallys for me, because I swear every time, like almost every single major fight he had, there was some major lapse. It might not have been something catastrophic, but it was like he had this style where he was always talking to the fighters, which to me is just a massive annoyance. Like, the fighters don't want to hear you, TV doesn't want to hear you, and we don't, like, that's also a distraction. to the fighter, you come on here with his mumbling and shit, come on, you guys, like he'd
He
do
did
that type of shit.
become like he was definitely one of those guys that became like he needed to be the star more so than the whole fight itself. Yeah.
And he, like, just an easy example, dude, was Mayweather Ortiz. As hilarious as
All
that
right,
shit
I
wound
knew
up.
he was the referee for that. I wasn't gonna say
Yeah.
I wasn't completely sure, but he was okay. Yeah,
I mean, and don't get me wrong, dude, because the result was hilarious. It was deserved. Victor
especially when
Ortiz.
Emmanuel Stewart's ah
Yeah. Oh, come on now. Yeah. Him and his fucking. Yeah, dude. It was hilarious. And the entire thing as like a spectacle was great. But as a refereeing performance, laughable. Dude wasn't even looking. There's photos in
I know he was,
4K.
and
In
that's his
fucking
face too. He was just kind of like, oh shit, what are you doing?
huh? Yeah, in 4K of that fool literally just being surprised by what's going on in the ring. But I mean, but that was literally him almost every single time. And so that's why I think he's worth bringing up, is because he's just
He also had one. I mean, look, I've never been one to stay for the Hall of Fame speeches on a Sunday, even though that's like the main reason why I guess some people go. But by Sunday, I'm kind of shot, man. I've been there.
He
Since
had a rambling
Thursday.
ass speech. I remember it.
Yes. The
Yeah,
one
so
year.
it's raining. We're over there in New York and the amateur Gold Gloves. I ain't gonna be able to fight.
Yeah, man.
It was
Literally,
like, dude,
the one
nobody wants to
year.
hear this, bro. He
The
went
one
like
year I
year.
had to stay that I actually stood for the speeches because my parents didn't take me back. I got a ride back, and we stood for it. And I had to listen to Joe Cortez, and bro, that was brutal, man. I ain't gonna front. That took. He just kept on going on and on and on.
Yeah,
then they mentioned that
not
he
a
was
fan.
fair and firm like 3 different times, and he shouted out the rest of the Vegas because all the other referees from the Nevada area came out, and he kept on like chanting them out like they was his children, and it was just like enough is enough, bro. Just
Yeah,
he made me realize why I don't stay for the speeches. Like I appreciate everything they do, and I'm glad they do it, but I cannot sit there for hours and listen to people just make from one speech to another. And that goes for this coming year. You know how many speeches are gonna be going on? I hope they put a time limit on that shit because my God.
yeah, dude, that's gonna be rough. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not trying to be mean. I honestly
Exactly.
but
No, it's their day in the sun, and they deserve every
I'm
moment.
not a
But
Joe Cortez
as
fan.
for me, I can't. I just can't sit there and listen. It's
Yeah, I'm not a Joe Cortez fan, dude. So
yeah,
for me, that's just a good. Yeah, I'll just throw that out there. But there's still a really good old timey one to be had.
Which one would that be?
We've got Bob Fitzsimmons versus Jack Sharkey.
Oh, geez, man. Easiest one, the one that actually tweeted about. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. I swear, Wyatt Earp, buddy, from the grave.
Him and his buddy Bat Masterson.
Oh, dude. Yeah, there was some incredibly poor, like really bad referees, and that was right around the era, like in the late 1800s, early 1900s, was like when I think they had gotten the idea that they could bring celebrities or known people in to referee or whatever, and not just referees. And man, what a bad idea! What a terrible idea,
dude. It goes with the same thing like we were talking about with the heavyweight champions. If you don't know how to referee a fight, if you don't know what's going on, the last thing you want to do just to gain publicity and think it's a joke is to put a guy who's not experienced involved with an actual fight, especially a big high profile fight, because you don't know what's going on. You don't know their agenda, especially back then. And
what you have two fighters who are rough, and know how to fight and know how to wrestle and shit, and then you just put them in there. Man, that's bad.
And then what the dude and then who was going to step up to Wyatt Earp too back then? Because I think he was a sheriff at that point in time.
Yeah, he was a known lawman, and yeah. I mean, he was, I think, for most of his life. But like, so you have Wyatt Earp being brought in, and that's actually fairly common too, to have the law involved in a lot of these fights back in this time, because back before athletic commissions were a thing in a lot of these places, they were overseen by law enforcement in some capacity. That's why you see so many fights around this time. Police intervention or police intervene, police stepped in to stop the fight, because they were waiting for it to become more than just a prize fight or something like that. There's a whole host of reasons why it might have been stopped. But Wyatt Earp was already renowned as like a lawman and Wild West dude or whatever type of thing, and a celebrity in his own right. But also at the same time, you kind of have to remember that a lot of the sheriffs and lawmen around this time were just also like regular ass people. They gambled, they drank, they did what the fuck ever. And in Wyatt Earp's case, he was a big gambler. That was his thing, was he was, big into playing cards and gambling and shit. So, I mean, the
and then
entire
shooting people too.
yeah, the entire backstory behind this is not exactly a surprise in that regard. But dude, the heavyweight championship between Bob Fitzsimmons and Jack Sharkey. Jack Sharkey is already
Tom Sharkey.
Or yeah, sorry, Sailor Tom Sharkey. Sorry, but he's just like this little dude who's like 5'7" or something like that, and like 200 pounds,
built like a tank, and he had the crudest tattoo of a ship on his chest that just probably hurt like a bitch. Oh my god, because that was definitely some primitive style back then of getting a tat.
Yeah, way back before tattoos were like remotely fashionable or common. So I mean, somebody had a tattoo, and that shit was like fools. That was very noticeable. But yeah, dude, to give him that assignment between those two high profile names was pretty crazy, especially because Tom Sharkey was he seemed like a very cantankerous kind of grumpy dude.
By most accounts, look, I'm not going to say I'm the biggest expert on Sharkey and his personality or whatever it was, but yeah, he was a guy from that era that was short, stout, definitely wouldn't be a heavyweight today, but tough as all nails, and fought the best of his era at that point. Like, for one thing, at least right before like the Jack Johnson, even before Tommy Burns, like the whole Jim Jeffries era, a lot of those contenders and everything, they did mix and match and fight each other. Corbett, when he was around still, Fitzsimmons, Gus Rulin, did I pronounce his last name correctly?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, Rulon, Tom Sharkey, so on and so forth. Fitzsimmons, they all kind of mixed and matched and fought each other around back then. So there was a really deep era, a very tough era, and you had to, really hold your weight to be able to compete in it. You know what I mean? Because a lot of those guys were just like, at the cusp. And at that point in time, that was the cutting edge in terms of technique and technology, what was going on with these dudes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, no question, dude. And on top of that, like there was, I guess, a somewhat, like somewhat limited field from which to choose.
Kowinski too. Excuse me, I meant to mention like Kowinski, Ken McCoy. There was a bunch of them back then. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, no question, dude. Kowinski was definitely up in that mix. Jack Johnson too, but that was when he was pretty.
He was still green at that point. I want to say that Jackson. Excuse me, Jack Johnson was still learning his craft at the turn of the century. I don't even know if he was still a pro at the turn of the century, but like by that point when these guys were still going on, Johnson really hadn't come on the scene yet.
Yeah, he was still pretty young. Like Kowinski got him when he was later in his career, and Johnson was pretty early in his. But yeah, dude. So you have like with Wyatt Earp and Fitzsimmons and Sharkey. So I mean, you can imagine just the scene too, because there's been a number of actually somewhat famous sketches and cartoons done about it around the time that got passed around in the newspapers afterwards. Some really good ones. But through about 7 or 8 rounds of fighting, supposedly what wound up happening was that Bob Fitzsimmons has taken it to Sharkey. And Fitzsimmons, which is, that's not exactly a surprise because Fitzsimmons is a fantastic fighter, very skilled, very hard hitting, and one of the few fighters that's actually managed to hurt Sailor Tom Sharkey, because Sailor Tom Sharkey was like an absolute beast. Like you said, built like a tank. Like,
and you couldn't really hurt him either, man.
No neck. Go look up photos. The guy has 0 neck. You can't. And so he would bore in. And
cauliflower ear, the barrel chest, that tattoo. Very intimidating dude.
Yeah, extremely intimidating looking guy. And he would bore in, kind of push you against the ropes. And like I said, he was experienced as a wrestler and used to train in wrestling. And later on, actually had several pro wrestling bouts. Wasn't that good. I mean, I think, but that's kind of like it's kind of like a, relative, because he was a good wrestler against boxers, but against pro wrestlers wasn't that good. And he wound up getting, they would get the falls on him as they counted back in that time. But point is, that was his style, pushing back, being very aggressive and physical and stuff like that. But Fitzsimmons wasn't having it. He was leading him around the ring, pop, 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 just basically kicking his ass. And then on top of that, pushing him around in the clinch too, because Bob Fitzsimmons was an extremely strong dude.
He would have had a back of Gibraltar. Yeah, man.
He looks goofy. He looks goofy as shit. He looks like your uncle. He looks like somebody you would laugh at in the bar, dude. And then he'd go over and whoop your ass. But he was a blacksmith.
Yes.
Because his family and his family trade was blacksmithing, and he had apprenticed under his dad as a blacksmith ever since he was pretty young, and he was strong as shit. And so he had no trouble handling Tom Sharkey in this fight. And then so out of nowhere, basically, he hits Sharkey. Sharkey acts hurt, and Wyatt Earp declares that Bob Fitzsimmons has hit Sharkey low and hands Sharkey the win on the strength of this, quote unquote low hit. And it, like, an entire legal fiasco actually ensued because of this. It was a big thing.
Yeah, dude, it was absolutely insanity. And like we talked about before the show, I'm pretty positive that either this fight or Wyatt Earp being a referee was referenced in this film in the beginning of it. I haven't watched it in years, but I know that there was a part of it where they kind of referenced the fight where he was refereeing and some controversial shit arose and everyone like threw a big uproar of it. But yeah, that was definitely a big deal. It was even mentioned in the pictorial history of boxing of Nat Fleischer and Stan Mandray. There's a photo of Wyatt Earp and they talk about how he was a referee in it too. Like, that was the thing, man. That was a big deal. That was really, really controversial.
Yeah, it was big news. It was in a whole bunch of papers.
And it was kind of like a blatant screwing. Like, Fitzsimmons had there was no way he fouled him or did anything. He was just whooping his ass. So yeah. But yeah, nothing ever came out of it that like Wyatt Earp had money on Sharkey or this or that. I mean, like you mentioned, the dude was a lawman. He was a big time, sheriff and kind of a celebrity at that point. Who was going to try to pin anything on him? He was kind of untouchable at that.
And so it actually they took it to court. Wyatt Earp wound up having to go into court and testify that he saw a low blow. Tom Sharkey actually got brought in to testify, and he testified that he was hit low. I mean, it was it was bad. It was, everybody looked like shit. But regardless, what wound up happening with the court case was they threw it out because the fight wasn't supposed to be legal in the first place. But again, kind of circling back to this whole pavilion thing, it took place in Mechanics Pavilion, which was another one of the famous pavilions in San Francisco. You had the Mechanics Pavilion, which is where this took place, Roth's Arena, which was a little later, which was one of the other famous places in San Francisco or around San Francisco. But since this fight wasn't technically legal, the court didn't want to make a ruling on it. So it's kind of like going to the cops and be like, "Hey, dude, he stole my crack."
Yeah.
But it's that's just how it wound up. But in terms of the long-term effect here, dude, obviously we're talking about it. Wyatt Earp actually took a really big reputational hit because of this. For years and years and years, he was like depressed because people used to bring this shit up to him.
I mean, when you make a blunder that big, you kind of deserve it, right? I mean, especially when you hold yourself into that type of standard. So
yeah, you're a lawman and you're the big guy or whatever,
and you come with something that controversial that clearly you flubbed on that one. So
yeah, but so that's what, back in 1896, I believe it was 1895, 1896, and I mean that's going back quite a ways, going back 130 years.
It's way back then. Another one that wasn't that far back, but I did have to mention it because it's one of the more just blatant, the such blunderness and everything caused so many different catastrophes and so many different fallouts from it. But you and I both, like, when we talked about the show beforehand, we were talking about like we didn't want to bring up anything like too drastic or bad, especially like ring deaths and all that. But this has to be mentioned. The referee Alfredo Sorrow for Joel McClellan against Nigel Benn in 1995.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. And I guess I'll just kind of take a moment to say, if you did listen into this whole thing, please don't hit us up with, hey, you guys didn't talk about so and so referee where such and such fighter died. Like, we know that was a bad officiating performance because somebody died. So, just save your breath and typing, please. But yes, that was bad, obviously, because Gerald McClellan wound up in the state that he is currently. But I
But
mean,
it
even if
never
even
even
if he
had to
had
be like
not,
that. The fight should have ended in the first round. I'm going to stand by that. Like,
it probably
it,
should have.
yeah. And
It
not to
probably
say
should have.
that Ben couldn't have continued. Obviously, he could have, but just the way the circumstances are, if you go by the rules of boxing, Ben was counted out. But Alfredo Sorrow, who had no business whatsoever refereeing a fight of that magnitude for various reasons, I think employed a 20 count on Ben, didn't he?
The argument, yeah, yes, he did. The argument is that since Ben hit the apron and kind of exited the ring, that he
But
should have been
no,
given a
he
20
didn't. No,
count,
that was a
20
10
count.
count
But
still. You need to completely fall the hell out of the ring onto like press row or
yeah,
some shit.
yeah.
Like that was a
So
flop.
it was a bad call there. And then, yeah, dude,
And not
that's a
only
depressing
that,
fight to
like
watch. Oof.
he couldn't speak English. And not to say that
Mm.
has to be a complete requirement, but when both guys' primary
You got to at least
language is
count.
English, you would think,
Yeah, you got to at least count in English, I
yeah.
mean, I would imagine. But
And when they had a documentary, the documentary that came out about a decade ago about that fight, and they're interviewing Asaro, and he's trying to justify that he could referee that fight, and he counts. He's like, "Yo, 1, 2." No, still, even at that point, he's trying like he has the basic things. He was like, break, clinch, get no, like this isn't amateur boxing. This isn't the type of thing where you can get away with that. This is a pro fight with two
yeah,
nasty ass dudes, two of the nastiest guys in the division of that era, clashing heads, and you putting your involved. It was a recipe for disaster.
and there were a bunch of behind the scenes things on McClellan's side, supposedly
Yes.
with a visa, with his team. I mean, there's a fairly large book written about this encounter. War Baby by Kevin Mitchell is great book. But you know, yeah, there was a lot of outside circumstances too. So it's like you can't just blame it on somebody. However, it was a consistently bad performance from that referee who allowed Nigel Benn to really just hammer the shit out of Gerald McClellan's brainstem with
Mm-hmm.
rabbit punches, dude. Like badly. And it's not like Nigel Benn's like not a puncher. He's a massive puncher.
Huge.
So that's just a terrible, terrible performance, dude.
And that's what it was. So round one, McClellan comes right out the jump the way he does. And at that point in time, I remember watching the first time I saw McClellan was against the rematch against Julian Jackson. Came out Mike Tyson and just blitzed him in a round. And he looked like he was doing the same thing against Ben because when I watched it with my dad, and I didn't finish watching the whole fight. I fell asleep during it, but I did watch I remember watching the first few rounds. The first round he came out there, just blah, 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 blah. Ben had no idea what the hell just happened. Ben, who was a notoriously slow starter himself, sometimes got caught. He was just caught and he overwhelmed. But he was legitimately hurt when he got knocked through the ropes. And like you said, that he was out for more than 10 seconds. Any other referee who was competent would have ended it right then and there. And he didn't. It was a very, very long count. He did the whole thing, and Ben got brought through. But that was a lot of controversy and bullshit right
Yeah,
there.
he kind of got helped through a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, and
It was
everything.
bad.
It was ridiculous. But McClellan was robbed of a knockout from the jump. And then from there, like you mentioned, the rabbit punches. It was just a brutal, brutal fight. That one that I don't even like to go back and watch now, knowing what happens. And it's bad. Like there's a lot of fouls, and by the end of it, McClellan is just like, his eyes are just vacant. You know what I mean? And when he goes down at
And
the
the
end,
blinking. Yeah.
yeah, with the blinking and everything, and then goddamn Freddie Pacheco calling him out saying he quit. Like it's just bad all around. But that referee, dude, he just was completely incompetent. He let everything go on. He didn't. I don't think he took any points away. I'm positive he didn't take any points away. And yeah, just I'm not going to put full, like you said, full blame on everything on just that, but certainly that was a major factor.
Yeah, there was just a lot going on overall, like, in surrounding the fight. But the way that he allowed him to hit him with so many rabbit punches was just, that's the kind of shit. And we were just talking about that with Lawrence Okolie yesterday. Yesterday, that was the exact same kind of thing happened, where I don't even know the referee's name. I'd have to bring it up, but he allowed Okolie to get hit with like, maybe a couple dozen or more rabbit punches, and it's just, luckily nothing happened. But dude, Pritchard Colon,
Yes,
unfortunately,
yes.
got hit with endless rabbit punches, and it's the kind of situation where you just can't
Randy
let.
Carver is a name that most people won't be familiar with, but he was a prospect contender in the late '90s who got killed by Caribou Salim. Same thing, rabbit punches and a bunch of other stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
man. But on
that's
a
dangerous
lighter
shit.
note, we'll get off of that because it's just some dark shit that we'll get into. Another 20 count, and I wanted to bring this one up, and I'm pretty sure you weren't expecting this one. Do you remember Freddie Norwood, Derrick Gainer, and the shit show that came about?
Oh my god, dude, that was like just about any Freddie Norwood fight, take your pick, and that
But
shit
this one, but
devolved.
this
But
one takes the cake for how wild it was. And the ending of it ended with a 20 count from referee Paul Cita. With Norwood, I think. Well, this is what it was. Norwood, who was a lot shorter than Gainer. It was an ugly fight to begin with.
yeah, Gainer's just a gangly, like slapping ass. Like the dude
Yeah,
was just
and,
awkward to watch a lot of the time.
and Freddie Norwood, even though he was called Little Hagler, which was not an adapt nickname.
Yeah, it was an appearance only. That's
Yeah,
it.
exactly. A mauling guy who came in there and did his thing, but it was an ugly fight. One that it was just really, really bad, and it just didn't really appeal well. But the end of it is absolutely hilarious because Norwood, who was going low throughout the night, um, went low again, and Gainer decided to retaliate finally with two massive low blows. Norwood went down. The referee, Paul Cita, had no idea what was going on, completely lost control, and started a 20 count on Norwood because he didn't know what else to do.
Yeah,
which
dude.
Norwood couldn't finish, and then Gainer was awarded a knockout victory.
Yeah, and Gainer's like, understandably frustrated, after
Yes,
all of the mauling and fouling from Norwood, who was a notorious mauler and fouler. But yeah, dude, it's kind of like, it's very Hatton Zoo-esque, dude, where
but
Hatton just
yeah,
like
it's
whap
just
and just
completely
fucking,
off the rails, man. And you can tell he had no idea what was going on. The referee was just, yeah, it was bad.
oof. Yeah, dude. I didn't even know. I would not have thought about that one at
That one
all.
was just
That's a good
so
one.
funny. I watched it live, and I remember laughing. I watched it recently and just like skipped to the end because I didn't want to go through the whole fight. And seeing the ending of it, I started laughing myself again because it's absolutely ridiculous.
That's
It's
that's
completely
that's the
like,
that's the Ashley Simpson, dude. Well, my band played the wrong thing, so I just did a hoedown.
yeah, yeah.
It's the same thing.
You could tell the referee completely lost control. He doesn't know what the hell is going on. Norwood is writhing on the canvas. Gainer clearly just like he got pissed off, and rightfully so. You get hit low enough, you're gonna like retaliate, and it scored him a knockout victory. And then like the post fight interviews and everything, it was hilarious.
No, I wouldn't have thought of that one. That's a pretty good one, dude. The round robin between like some like those featherweights and then a couple of dudes who like were lightweight were really fun in like the late 90s.
Well,
Well,
absolutely.
at least fun in terms of like the entertainment factor, not necessarily from the fights themselves, just the
Yeah.
back and forth between them. I think I got one more. I think I got one more pretty good one that I think you also probably wouldn't have thought to bring up, but
Hell
I
yeah.
did think about it earlier, and I was like, all right, I think that's a pretty good one. Even though I don't know much about the background of the fight, it's a good go find this on YouTube and watch it fight because you'll be fucking shocked and probably vomit. It's Ingomar Johansen versus Eddie Machin. Like,
I
oh
wasn't gonna
my
bring
god,
that up, but yes, sir.
bro,
Absolutely, man.
wowzers,
Public
wowzers,
execution.
wowzers. Now there aren't, I mean, thank goodness Eddie Machin didn't wind up like Benny Perette from this, because it's pretty much the exact same type of situation where, and beyond it being the same type of situation, dude, Ingomar Johansen could really pop and was absolutely slaughtering Eddie Machin. I mean, dude, it's 2 minutes into the fight. Eddie Machin is obviously no match for Ingomar Johansen on this evening in Gothenburg, Sweden. You know, Ingomar Johansen had such a short window for like when he was actually good. And this came inside of that window. This is the fight that actually got Ingomar Johansen the shot at Floyd
Absolutely.
Patterson.
Yeah.
So, Eddie Machin gets stumbled backwards into what's another good example? Ike Williams versus Bojack. Like that's another very similar, like where the fighter just gets trapped in the corner and is like propped up, and the dude is just fucking hammering.
Or if you want to use a more recent example of someone just getting absolutely annihilated, you want to use Alan Green against Jadon Codrington.
Oh yeah, that was bad too.
So
yeah, that was bad.
Caught up
Mercer
on the rope.
Morrison,
Yeah,
just getting trapped on the ropes and just getting absolutely hammered. And that's exactly what happened here, except for obviously it was Ingomar Johansen and like full force, just fucking crack. The referee is just looking like he couldn't even be bothered. He was just like waiting for it to, and then you see Eddie Machin just drop to the canvas, like awful, just terrible, and the referee's like counting.
Machin's because he gets up the first time, correct?
Yeah, he got knocked down 2 or 3 times. Yeah, he like went down a few times.
The last knockdown, he's laying there unconscious. Like it looks like he's almost dead. His cornermen are helping him at this point, right? They are like tending to him, pulling out his mouthpiece, doing that. The referee is still counting. Like that is one of the more surreal scenes, one of the crazier scenes you will ever see. The referee is still counting while Machin's corner is trying to like revive him from being completely obliterated. It is one of the most brutal, scary, vicious,
dude,
unnecessary looking knockouts you will ever see, man. Because
in this day and age, some EMT would be like jump kicking that referee out of the way, like fucking
after the first knockdown. After the first knockdown, not even like letting him get up, because like you mentioned, Machin, who was a very, very good fighter, a hard luck guy who
just came around at the wrong time.
Yeah, man, came around the Patterson era when Customato was going to make sure that he had no chance of getting a title shot back then, and
got fed to Sonny Liston
and everyone else around that time. Yeah, so it's like you watch it, like you said, that when he gets dropped, man, because like Johansen kind of like jumps at him with that right hand, boom, boom, and like drops him hard. Machin wasn't expecting it. He's out. And he gets up and he's a corpse. Like, he has no idea what's going on. And anyone else would have stopped it immediately. Instead, he just came in, he was able to tee off, and it's bad. It's really, really brutal. And Johansen just went off on him, and the referee is just kind of standing there like, yeah, go ahead, finish him. This isn't a Roman like gladiator era or some crazy shit. Like, you're not supposed to let a fight go on like that. This was on par at brutality, on par for like Dempsey Willard type issue. You know what I mean? It's disturbing. And Machin, unfortunately, was never the same after that knockout. Never. Whether it was in his professional career or like personal life either. Like, he was just,
Yeah, it's an awful, like, even objectively, it's really a bad knockout. Like, his head hits hard. He takes a lot of hits. It's bad. And I mean,
it's really, really bad. He never
Andrew Smythe. That's the referee's name, Andrew Smythe. I know that he had refereed a number of other, like, not massive fights, but like, a higher profile heavyweight fights around this time. But he had no business. No business.
Oh man, not at all, dude. That's a really good one, actually. A very, very good example. And actually, I got to bring it up to mention this too, because a friend of ours on Twitter mentioned this one. Ninja Mike OG, actually. Ninja Mike 67, excuse me. Roger Yanez, referee Roger Yanez. He remember Alice Garcia, Bernard Benton? Same thing. Well, just Benton just get absolutely teed off and just blasted uncontrollably. There's referees like that just let shit like that happen. And like Cooney Norton, for example, things like that. But the last one I'm going to bring up, just because it got brought up so much on Twitter from people asking about it or mentioning it when I brought it up, was you have to bring up Lucien Boutte against
Librado Andrade.
Yes, Librado Andrade,
yeah.
Marlon B. Wright.
I remember that very well.
Everybody
Marlon Wright. I don't know if Marlon Wright. I'm not even sure he's still alive.
No, he's not. He passed away a few years ago, unfortunately.
Yeah, but he was refereeing for a number of years after that. So it's
I
not
mean,
like
to
that
be
like killed
honest,
his
I'm going to
career.
say that was his only. I think that was his only controversy was that fight. After that,
That was just kind of a and on top of that, to be fair, that didn't seem like a blatant like corruption. Like that was like he made a shitty decision like in the moment. Yeah, he made like a bad decision in the moment, and Librado Andrade, like I remember that. I actually remember watching that.
We all do.
And I remember feeling at the time like Andrade got fucked. Like
everybody did because everybody loved Andrade. He was such a good guy and hard looking, like easy to root for and all that.
And that was his moment. That was his only. That was the closest he was ever gonna fucking come.
He was losing the fight and everything. He had it right there, and then so it was emotion. I totally get it. Everybody.
But now looking back, he should have gone to his fucking corner, dude. He just should have gone to the corner. Damn it.
But if Richard Steele was doing his job too against Chavez, he would have turned around and realized that Chavez was literally right behind him and would have yelled at him, "Get back to your corner," and Meldrick Taylor would have survived that fight too.
That's true. And, I guess we do have to bring up Chavez Taylor, at least at some capacity, even just to ask, like, what do you feel about Chavez Taylor? What happened? Do you agree, disagree? I know.
Look, man, I'm gonna, it's easy to say as a referee, you're not supposed to know what time it is. You're just looking at the fighter's eyes. But dude, literally, it's Taylor fought the fight of his life. Here's the things I'm gonna say. Taylor literally fought the fight of his life the whole time. He did. All right. Even though Lou Duver and George Benton surprisingly gave him bad advice, told him you need to go out there and fight him tooth and nail to win this fight, which he didn't. But they told him that he should have just tried to stay away because he was completely shot. Like he had fought that point that much that he deserved to at least get out of it, like to at least get the benefit of the doubt. All right. As a champion, he should have gotten that. 2, Steele, like when they're right there, you can't tell me, you can't tell me you can't see that fucking red light flashing in your eye, signifying 10 seconds. Even though you're looking at Meldrick Taylor, you have to see that. It's bright enough, it's right there. And it was flashing that there was only 10 seconds left. All right. And then all those things, Steele should have done that right there. It was the heat of the moment or whatever it may have been. I don't find any corruption, but like, I think Taylor should have deserved that. And even though regardless of if he had won or lost, Taylor's career would have ended the way it was because he definitely would have been ruined from that fight. He deserved at least to have that victory.
Yeah, I tend to agree, dude. Like, I mean, I agree with the stoppage in the sense that because we now have the benefit of 2020 hindsight and we know what happened to Meldrick Taylor. So it's like, yeah, it's easy to look at that and say he made the correct decision because that dude was fucked up. And had he taken another punch, who knows? And that's true. I don't think that's incorrect to say. But at the same time, that's with the benefit of hindsight. That's knowing everything we know now. And at the time, Richard Steele obviously didn't know that. And just in terms of like cosmic justice, fucking karma, whatever you want to call it, balancing out, it's like Meldrick Taylor deserved to win that fight, and obviously deserve has nothing to do with it, but he deserved to win that fight.
And then, but here's the thing is that like that fight is so controversial in what he's defined by that people forget. Literally around that same time, less than a year later, he had another one with Tyson Razor Roddick.
Yep. That's right. And the combination of those things, dude, it was mostly Taylor Chavez, but plus Tyson Ruddock. That dude for like a decade, 15 years, 20 years. Yes. He can't go anywhere with people. Boo, fuck Richard Steele. Like literally. Yeah. Like he can't go anywhere. So he's paid his dues.
I'll give you a perfect example, bro. All right. When I was a kid, my dad was a boxer. Obviously, that's why I got into the sport because of my dad. But like when I wasn't into boxing, really, I was like slightly learning about the sport. I knew who Chavez was and Tyson and a couple other guys, but I wasn't really a fan yet. I used to overhear them talking about Richard Steele. My dad and his uncles, they would always like, when they were talking about boxing and all that. And then one day I read a magazine because I knew who Chavez was because I think at this point he lost to Randall. And I remember reading it and it said on the cover and the headlining of it said Richard Steele is a dirty bleep. That's what it said, bleep. Completely, all right? So you're gonna laugh at this. I go with my mom to Chicago for a business trip, and we went to some like famous pizza restaurant, right, where they gave you white out to paint on the walls, whatever you want, right?
I already know where this is going, but do it.
Literally, I'm not bullshitting you. This is absolutely true. I'm a kid and I don't even know what I'm writing, but for whatever reason, seeing Chavez, a pissed off Chavez on a cover of a magazine, and with the cover of it, I wrote down with whiteout, Richard Steele is a dirty bleep. I didn't even know what I was writing. I literally just wrote that because I didn't know what else to write. I think my mom just wrote Pina family here, 19, whatever it was. And I wrote that.
Still written there to this day.
Who knows? Hopefully it was covered up since then because I like Richard Steele. But
that's hilarious.
I was a kid. I'm not even lying. I really wrote that. That shows you how much of a weird nerd I was as a kid.
That's fucking hilarious. That's how far back we go.
Yes.
So before we get out of here, dude, I actually did. I took a few minutes because this is something I've been meaning to do, and I was a bad guy, bad boy, kept fucking up and forgetting. And so I wanted to take a few minutes to give some shout outs to people I know that have been listening and have been commenting and saying shit. And just why not? Because that's the right thing to do. So I did want to give out some shout outs to Gotham Nagesh, for instance, Bradley Edwards, Corey Erdman, Gray Johnson, Lily Uloa, Austin Tyler, Sam Acuna, Reggie Dunlop, Theo Coggs, Lee Gormley, Corey Heitman, Chris Dowdle, Mateo Boom Boom, my boy, Luis 8 Deuce, D2, B2, I think is his Twitter name, Swill Dog, my boy Anthony, Liberationist MA, Romel Marquez, Nooch, Enoch, Alex Pierpoli, our guy Eric Freeds, Ninja Mike 67, Master Angler Jim, Briley Van Dyke, Matt Clark, Ross Sutherland, Jay Sparks, Robert Gillies. So if I missed anybody, I apologize. I really do. Tried to cover as many people as possible because, look, dude, I know Aris feels the same way. Like, we're just on here fucking talking, having fun. We love history. We love boxing. So a lot of this is just us, like, we have these same kind of conversations, like not recorded fairly frequently. So this is just us having
almost
fun.
Every day, bro.
Dude, like pretty frequently. So this is just us having fun. And if you're really listening in and enjoying it, like, we appreciate you, because showing us support it's good shit, dude, and makes us feel good. Aris, I appreciate you, bro. Thanks for doing the ref thing with me.
This was a lot of fun today, man. Thank you for having me. Yeah, this is awesome.
Well, everybody, including everybody I just shouted out and named, in the meanwhile, while you wait for a new episode, if you are on social media, if you wouldn't mind giving us a follow, that would be appreciated. For instance, if you're on Twitter, follow my boy Aris Pina at Punch Zone Aris. Follow me, Patrick Connor, at Patrick M. Connor. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. But if you go on to YouTube and you watch us there, subscribe, give us a comment and rating, appreciated. And also the podcast apps, of course, wherever it is you might listen. Rating, comment, always appreciated. Aris, we will converse soon, bro.
Sounds good. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
All right, everybody, later.